It's Thursday afternoon, 4 p.m. in Central Europe. It's Space Café Israel time. Our Space Café Israel by Meidad Pariente with his guest, Dr. Reut Sorek Abramovich. I hope I pronounced it correctly. Will begin soon. As always, we really appreciate your participation and ongoing feedback, and we will learn and improve based on your feedback. I'm Elena Vocale, event coordinator at SpaceWatch.Global. SpaceWatch.Global is a Europe-based online platform for information in and about space and new space activities in a geopolitical context. I would like to thank all our private and corporate supporters that showed their commitment to keep our independent journalism alive. We really do appreciate that. If you want to be part of the supporter team, it is just a click away from you on our website. I know many of you are already familiar with our website, our bi-weekly and daily newsletters, and the Space Café podcasts. The latest one features Carlo Buontempo, director of the Copernicus Climate Change Service at the Copernicus European Center for Medium Range Weather Forecast. We also have new exciting episodes of Space Café Radio with Luca Del Monte of ESA, also Chiara talk with the team of SSP23 in Brazil, so definitely worth your time. Our fan shop is open for you to visit on our website, and it's a nice way for you to become a space watcher. If you've missed any of our previous web talks, don't worry, we have an archive on our webpage in the event section, and of course, you can find us on YouTube. We will host our Space Café Israel live regularly, and with that, my job for today is almost done, and I'd like to hand over to your host today. Signor Pariente, over to you.
Grazie mille. Thank you, Elena. Hello, everybody, and welcome to Space Café Israel, episode 6, the last one for 2022. My guest today is Dr. Reut Sorek Abramovich, an astrobiologist at the Dead Sea and Arava Science Center. Her research topics include the beginning of life on Earth, extremophile evolution and adaptation, COVID-19 viral evolution, using bacteria and algae for life support systems in space, and forward and backward contamination in human exploration missions. She is also the Space Science Department co-chair for ISU 2023 Space Studies Program in Brazil. We're going to talk about biotech and health issues for future space missions. Who is up for the challenge? Hello, Reut.
Hello, everybody.
It's so good to see you here.
Great to be here.
You were just back from Brazil, am I right?
Yes. I'm just back from Brazil, from Sao Paulo, and we have a great program coming up next year in the International Space University for the summer space program. We're expecting a lot of participants, and we're having great collaborations with the local folks there. So if you're interested in space ecosystem, you should totally check out the website. It's ssp23.isunet.edu, and you can see so much more information there as well. And Brazil is awesome.
I'm sure it is. So, Reut, I always like to ask my guests whether they can share something personal about themselves that is not part of the CV or something that you can find on LinkedIn. So what is your special thing?
So my special thing started when I was doing my PhD in Australia, and I decided I needed to gain something that will help me mentally and psychologically. So I started doing belly dancing, and people don't know this, but belly dancing, and I was pretty good at it. I had tremendous fun with a beautiful group of dancers as well. And the beautiful thing about Sydney is that there's a lot of immigrants from all around the world. So I had the chance to dance with and alongside people from Iran, from Egypt, from Turkey, from Lebanon, from Egypt, from Mexico, and from other places as well. And it was like a new Middle East happening all over there. So it was great.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's a trait that you should definitely put in your CV.
Okay. Noted.
So you started your career at the Unit 8200 at the IDF. You
Correct.
were a QA team leader at Checkpoint Software Technologies, and then you moved to biology, genetics, and ecology. What made you change your career course?
I was always interested in biology, even during high school. I always wanted to work in space, and I felt affinity to go and check what's happening with life forms elsewhere. Always been a space geek, always loved, Star Trek and Star Wars and things like that. So for me, going into the biological aspects of things all related to space was very natural. And then I had to decide whether I'm going for the human physiology aspect of it, how humans behave, how they operate, how the body responds to different things in space, a bit more medical and human-centered, or to try out everything else. So I said, let's go for a different path or different road. And I'm happy to be in extreme environments on planet Earth, which are great analogs to other environments that we find in the solar system and elsewhere.
Interesting. When I spoke with people about this episode, and I told them that I'm going to interview you, an astrobiologist, my daughter said, "That's great, but what is astrobiology?" So what is astrobiology, and what does an astrobiologist do?
So astrobiology is a multidisciplinary field of science. It has a lot of different aspects to it, and it's actually fascinating. The word astrobiology was first coined by NASA in 1990. It's fairly new, and before that, it was comprised from exobiology and extrabiology and xenobiology and all sorts of stuff, until NASA decided to put an end to the mixture of things and said, okay, we're gonna look for life elsewhere by looking for and understanding life here on Earth. So the multidisciplinary aspect of it means that as astrobiologists, we can either go towards what is the origin of life on planet Earth, and hence where life can start elsewhere in the universe. And that really drills down into very basic, almost philosophical questions, such as what is, a life form? When was the first life form detected? When was the first life form formed on planet Earth? And how did we evolve here on the planet, and what were the conditions for it? And other aspects include, for instance, extreme environments. So if I can find something that is happily living in Antarctica, then perhaps I can find something that is very happy to live in, for instance, Europa, which is an icy moon of Jupiter. And if I find something in the Dead Sea, which likes to live in 375 grams salts per liter, then perhaps I can find something that can handle that on Mars, which has a lot of salt in its regolith and in its soil. So that's extreme environments. We look at the habitability, where life can flourish, where they cannot, what are the limits. We're looking at biotechnological applications for some of these extreme microorganisms. We look at their adaptation. And I also like to say that we need to look at time scales in astrobiology. So one of the things, because I look at the origin of life and I talk about their evolution here and how it might happen someplace else, people need to realize how long it really took to things to happen here on planet Earth as we understand it here, and why perhaps detecting intelligent life forms is such a hard or almost impossible at the moment task for us humans. So it's a super interesting, I really love it. I work a lot with geologists and chemists, and sometimes I work with authors and artists, and people are thinking about future options and how these things happen. So you need to have like a really well-rounded approach to different scientific issues, and I love it. I love the community. It's a great community to be with, and we really like to exchange many, many ideas.
So what's your day-to-day look like?
I do not have a really good routine at the moment. I seem to be hopping around from place to place. Part of my work is scientific in the academia, so that includes writing articles, writing grants, visiting the lab, talking to students and talking to colleagues. I do a lot of outreach, so part of my work as the head of the Israeli Mars Society is maintaining all our connections with other Mars Society chapters, for instance, and perhaps, enabling and helping local science fairs or local activities by people who are interested in Mars. And then, of course, I have my international side of things, where I go and I try to promote very interesting projects, whether they're going to happen in Antarctica or they're going to happen in the region of the Middle East, or for instance, in the International Space University, that it's going to happen in Brazil, and it's an amazing international event. I'm really looking forward to that one.
Well, it sounds to me that your lack of routine is an amazing place to be in. So
it fits me. It fits me. It took a while to get here. It fits me. It fits me. It's okay.
We talked about your research that includes extremophiles, evolution, and adaptation. I wonder, are tardigrades alien life form? Are there any similar species on Earth?
So there are two questions there, Meidad.
Yeah.
Tardigrades are like really cool. And one of the things I would love to have is a sample return mission from the moon, because, you know, Space Israel and Bereshit 1 sort of like landed with a bit of tardigrades, and it would be super interesting just to pack that place up, send it back and see what's happening with those tardigrades. They're not alien life forms. They're very successful. They really fit into their ecological niche, and they're very happy where they are. They're, you know, they can survive pretty extreme environments. It's an interesting debate in the community whether the tardigrades from Bereshit 1 have survived the blast or not. We need to test that out. Now, what was the second question? Was what species like
is there another species that, for example, can tolerate this amount of radiation like tardigrades do?
So tardigrades, the beauty of tardigrades is that they are part of the kingdom which is called Animalia. So they're basically very complex organisms, right? They're not microorganisms, they're not bacteria, archaea, or fungi, or any of those. They're real animals. They have appendices, they have gut, they have a primitive, I don't know if it's a brain, but they have like all those systems coming together. It's a multicellular.
It's a chip.
Yeah, it's a cute little buddy, you know. They're working around and munching at leaves and moss and stuff. So from the Animalia's perspective, I'm not familiar with anything that is even close to what tardigrades can do. And that's also because tardigrades have a very interesting mechanism. So they sort of like they go into in a dehydration mode, and they completely take out every water out of their bodies. And the reason that's such a good mechanism is because water has this very special physical property that if you freeze them, for instance, their surface area actually grows, right? When you put something in ice, it actually, you know, it grows, it doesn't go smaller. So in many aspects, water molecules are the basis for our life. But if you change a bit the temperature, they really cause a lot of damage to tissues. So tardigrades have that mechanism. It's pretty fascinating. It's still ongoing research. I don't know anything else in the Animalia, you know, district of life that knows to do what tardigrades do. We do know that lichens, which are a completely different section, are really resistant also to high radiation, vacuum, different weird temperatures, and so on and so forth. But tardigrades are the only animals that I'm aware of. The rest are microorganisms and fascinating other things, but, you know.
Okay, so I didn't hear no regarding whether aliens or not. So
okay, I think they're not aliens. I think we should realize that for 4.5 billion years, Mother Nature was capable of producing like the range of possibilities is endless on planet Earth. We're like a biosphere hotspot, and everything that can be done has been done on this planet. And sometimes we find, you know, remnants of it, but most of the times we don't. So what are we going to find elsewhere? That's the whole point. Let's go elsewhere. Let's go find more stuff.
I'm with you. Let's talk about using bacteria and algae for life support systems in space.
Right.
What? Why? How?
So algae specific. Let's start with the algae part and then move to the bacteria part. So algae have been used actually in different experiments in the U.S. Navy since the 50s and the 60s of the last century, because they realized that if you have algae, which can withstand a lot of harsh conditions, and it's not a very spoiled kind of organism, and it produces oxygen. So you can use that perhaps to use it into like atmospheric conditions to improve your atmospheric conditions and add more oxygen and fresh oxygen to places which are enclosed, let's say submarine, let's say spaceships and so on and so forth. And they have been going around it for like really almost a millennia now in order to get that happening. And in addition to that, algae are really good food basically. They have a lot of high nutrients, vitamin, minerals, the shebang. It's like the whole package. So they produce oxygen, they can withstand harsh conditions, and you can use them for food. So it's a really interesting project to gather that and maximize their functionality within a technical system, as we know now, which is the ECLES system, all the different life support systems that we have on the International Space Station and so on and so forth. It's a prolific study area. There's groups in Europe, so there's additional groups in Israel which do it, and people are looking for how to improve that and put it inside. When we go to space, whether it's for commercial space station and whether it's for remote bases on the moon or elsewhere, you would really, really like to have some fresh food. And if it can add oxygen and remove CO2 from the atmosphere, from the scrubbers and everything, you're gold. It's like the package, right? So people are really looking into that. And the issue with bacteria is that we wanted to look. So a lot of algae actually do work with different types of bacteria. They have symbionts, they help one another, they do photosynthesis. These guys sort of like take other nutrients and they have a very nice symbiosis and they work together very well and produce more biomass. So we were looking into extremophiles from the Dead Sea because extremophiles from the Dead Sea can handle nasty stuff. Like what? Like hydrazine, like biofuels, like other things, not biofuels, but like other really nasty stuff. And they can, that's part of the beautiful of working with microorganisms, that they tend to have flexibility sometimes in things that you chemically wise might be a bit difficult to degrade. And we can use, so we had a few like, not only in Israel, but also in the world, you have like these fuel leaks, right? And you have all these fuel being spilled and it's kilometers and it's yucky and it's a disaster for the ecology. What we find out in these different arenas and in these events is that you can use different types of bacteria in order to degrade the oil and let the ecosystem restore itself. So I was thinking about using these algae on one hand and extremophiles on the other hand to do the best of both. And basically, if you have, for instance, an unused fuel tank that has spent its hydrazine or its hydrogen or other fuels that are going to be in use in recent years, then you can put this inoculum, you can put this composition of bacteria and algae and get the best of both worlds. So this is now this is going to be published in maybe a month or two. Our first preliminary with a very nice group, a research group from Bar Ilan University and from the Dead Sea Arava Science Center and also from Afeka College. And my specific research was supported by the Israeli Space Agency, and I'm very happy with the results at the moment. But it's preliminary results. You just check if the thing works, if they don't die. It's very important that they don't die. It's very important that they actually work with the hydrazine, which is extremely toxic. So it was quite a thing, yeah.
So if I get it right, my spirulina shake can also purify the air and generate oxygen in the future space hotel?
Exactly.
Oh, cool.
And you will get the psychological effect of dealing with something which is from nature, and you're gonna make it happy, and it's gonna make you happy in return, and all will be well.
That's important. That's very important.
Yeah. I think
for the past 2 years, you studied COVID-19 viral evolution at the Shamir Medical Center in Asaf HaRofeh Hospital. Do you think there are lessons learned from how humanity dealt with the pandemic that we can implement for future exoplanet colonies?
Yes, absolutely. So the first thing, it's from an operational point. So there are two main items in this topic. One is, what do you do when you're having a problem of pandemic and you have a medical problem and someone is really, really, really remote? So for instance, Canada has just announced a year ago that they're going to promote deep space healthcare. And the reason is because they have so many untreated areas in the Canadian territories. It's so huge that they really think that things like telemedicine, like artificial intelligence, like things that are relevant to a deep space mission, are actually pretty useful here on planet Earth. So if you're talking about COVID-19, then the way all of a sudden people didn't have to come to the hospital in order to get certain treatments, right? They had whether it's their physician on call, or they had even a bot trying to help them to realize what the situation is. So everything that has to do with getting remote healthcare and remote medical assistant is relevant basically for space mission. And that's one of the things that, at least in Israel, was implemented, this distributed way of doing community medicine and health medicine and hospital and treating people. It's been an amazing experience, actually. It was people were all the time talking about digital health and, lowering the numbers of patients being hospitalized and making sure that you can get whatever you need at home. But things were not really progressing in the manner I would look for, But then all of a sudden you had the pandemic, and people from, from autoimmune deficiency and other places could not leave their house. And then you had all these restrictions. So it really gave a leap to all those technologies to be implemented in Israel. And I think Canada is looking forward to do something similar in their, in their territories and things like that. And I think it's an excellent opportunity, an amazing dual usage case. And the other thing is, what are we going to do when you have a pandemic in a remote base? And that's, what can I say? If you're really in a remote place, you're probably going to just have to isolate yourself forever, more or less. And you're going to have to find a way to monitor your situation. COVID-19 made it very clear to me, at least, that you need quite a lot of equipment in order to understand how, for instance, how do you say it? How not effective, how susceptible you are to infect other people, right?
Okay.
Yeah, people had this antigen and they had the PCR, and then there was this whole issue of what cycle of the PCR means that you're still infective. And every pandemic that we had on planet Earth, whether it was AIDS, whether it was SARS, whether it was MERS, whether it was COVID-19, and whatever comes in the near future, we're going to have that issue. Are you infective? And how long until you're not infective? So the first thing that you need to do is to have a really good monitoring system, and you need to really isolate yourself. One of the things I'm really worried about space conditions, whether it's the moon with the 6 gravity of planet Earth or Mars and so on and so forth, is that we're not there in understanding how populations of microorganisms are going to react to those conditions. And the issue is not the gravity, it's the exposure to radiation. And from a human perspective, how your immune system is working when you're constantly under stressful conditions, you're away from your family, you're under perhaps stress, duress, perhaps you're doing a lot of repetitive and boring, day-to-day facility issues, and you're getting, there's a lot of issues coming into it that takes your immune system down and gets you susceptible to germs. And then the question is, wait a second, are germs even more pathogenic in space because of radiation and I don't know what? And then, of course, everything jumps on you. So medical assistant in space is a must. And it's an interesting issue, I think.
And do you think that the effort that went into the vaccine development, is this something that you think we should prepare ourselves to? So, for example, do active tests of taking viruses and germs to space and then study them and search whether we need to come up with new methods of dealing with violent pathogenic germs?
Okay, so let's broaden the envelope and not talk about viruses and vaccines, but let's talk about the whole medical and health issues that we're going to encounter in space. So if you look at the history of space, there have been a total of 365 human space missions to date since the 1960s of the last century. And there was a total of about 600 people, astronauts in space, including Russia and China and so on and so forth. And 10% of those were women. And almost everyone selected within those 1,600 people went through a rigorous selection process and came with a health bill that looks like, 100 points, 200 points with no, interesting, even not, family history of this and that was, they went through a very rigorous health selection process. All these
even the space
people,
tourists.
So the recent space tourists did not go through the same system.
Okay.
So what I'm saying is that the entire medical knowledge that we have on the human physiology in space basically comes from those 600 people. 10% are women, and most of them are like top-notch in fit physical health with no medical history whatsoever, and even going, 3 generations back in their family. So when you look at that medical data, you need to take a step back and realize that once you have more and more tourists in, right, you're going to have much more diversity of issues, and you're going to have to treat them. And until you get there, you don't know what you just don't know what you're going to have. So you really need a really good health support system and monitoring system when you start with doing all these tourists going up to space. So now it's actually an interesting place for the main actors in healthcare and in space medicine to actually come forward and say, okay, we're not just interested in doing how does paracetamol works, that disintegrates in the liver of one astronaut, 10 years. I mean, they can do so much more right now if they get their gears together and if they do it in a focused manner. So you will shorten the time of health disasters and health problems for all of us when we go up to space. I think the next decades are super, super exciting when it comes to the amount of people that we're going to see in space, especially first in LEO, in low Earth orbit, which we recognize some of the issues there because we have the ISS. But when you go further on, the moon, the length of the longest mission was 12 days, right? It was like 3 people. So there's so much more we need to learn, and it's a big opportunity right now. And Canada has shown that it can use it as a dual usage case. So I think it's a valid point to do that.
Cool. There's a lot going on regarding future human missions, and for sure the database will increase.
And who's going to own that database, and who's going to make patents of it, and who's going to accelerate the research and R&D, and help the government and the health insurance and be the top dog in that area.
That's
no
easy.
clear.
The pharmaceutical companies.
Which one? There's like
all of them.
But why 6 of them? I mean, that's what I'm saying. Who's gonna take the lead? Who's gonna develop their own astronautic divisions? So it was very interesting, by the way, for me, when Axiom 1 with the Israeli private astronaut Eitan Stiva and his team, I was like looking around, like, what are they doing? Like, who's taking care of them? It can't be NASA. So who is it? SpaceX? But SpaceX how many medical officers? I mean, that doesn't make any sense. So it's back to NASA. But NASA, they're not really astronauts. So it's Axiom 1. But who are like the medical professionals that are in the Axiom 1, list? And I didn't see much. So I started looking around for all these different answers. And apparently all these 3 companies, not companies, NASA is a federal organization, but those 2 companies, they actually had a real issue with that, understanding, okay, who's giving the health insurance here? It's a $50 million. I know the government, currently governments have their responsibility to issue the insurance for the citizens if their citizens are flying to space. But that can't hold water if you have hundreds of people going up. Someone else has to come in and hopefully make money out of it as well, so it will be worth their time. Yeah.
No, the space hotel is just around the corner, 2030, 2035.
Just around.
I assume that there will be a medical bay at that space hotel. Did you already apply?
So no, I'm an astrobiologist. I'm not a physician. But I will probably be the microbiology lab tech for sure.
Are you aware of any plans regarding medical healthcare and for the space tourists at the space hotel?
No, I'm not. I think they're trying to, they will add. I haven't seen an organized plan, and I'm pretty sure that they're going to take a lot of seasoned astronauts which have medical profession from the medical profession with them. I think they're basing some of their experience from what NASA knows happens to us. It really depends what type of mission they're going to, whether it's a 15-minute orbital flight, or whether it's a bit long duration, whether it's a LEO, low Earth orbit, or if it's beyond. So, and also I have to say I had an interesting conversation in recent weeks, and apparently the facilities are going to be so much better, so much better than what an International Space Station is at the moment, that probably people would feel very comfortable. Their immune system will not be stressed out. They will be able to enjoy, not just to survive the experience. And so I'm guessing we're going to see actually a lot of people enjoying space and not having a lot of health issues. And I'm looking forward to someone professional gathering the data in a really good way. So at the moment, most of the data that comes from NASA astronauts, for instance, so it's a lengthy process to get that just the medical data that they collect during their flights. And then there's a whole issue of their behavioral, right? And psychology is a really important issue for space mission. But to get their behavioral inputs, that's a super private matter. You don't have access to it unless you get really a lengthy approval procedure by certain departments from NASA. So that data is unavailable at all for people who are trying to understand what would be the best environment for humans in space. So we're lacking data. So someone needs to start to collect the data and make sure that it's available for the wider public. And I think tourists would be happy, right? When you go someplace. Yeah, I'm not a national. If I go as a tourist, I'm not a national symbol of my country. I paid money to do this. I'm a private customer. Maybe I don't want to share all my information, but what if this can help, my daughter or future generations to come and enjoy or provide a new medicine? I'm from a generation that goes, yeah, no problem. You take my blood test, take my behavioral, share it on the web. That's fine. As long as it's for good purposes. So that's another issue why you need more diverse people in space, because you want to get all that medical data and the behavioral data out.
Yeah, I always say that on the 20th century, people used to say, knowledge is power. You know that saying.
Yeah.
Today, sharing knowledge is power. And this is all about sharing knowledge.
Mm-hmm.
So we discussed forward and backward contamination. And I wanted to ask you, what is forward and backward contamination and how it will impact human exploration missions?
So forward and backward contamination, it's fairly easy. When you go forward, you bring with your microbiota, your skin germs, everything that's with your equipment, and you land in a new place, and you provide that new place with a small sample of planet Earth, basically.
Not me, I take a shower before I go to space.
Yes, but you still have your inner microbiota in your gut and everything. So it's nice that you're taking a shower. We like to take showers, of course. It's not enough. And maybe an ultrasonic shower, I'm not sure. But and that's forward contamination. And backward contamination is when you take a sample for someplace and you roll it back into your base or into your spaceship or into planet Earth. And this whole issue has to do with something which is called planetary protection. And it's very important from two aspects. Two main aspects I usually talk about. One is the science integrity data, right? You want to go to Mars, you want a sample, you found a life form, you really, really, really want to know it's Martian.
Yes. Absolutely.
You went all the way, like billions of dollars, all the PR, and you found something. You really, 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 really want to know that it's Martian, it came from Mars, it was, originated from there, it evolved there, it's happy there, and it never came with you. So you really have to pay attention to what you bring with you and how much contamination, perhaps what's the contamination potential that goes. And the planetary and the Protection Planetary Committee, and also there's a committee called COSPAR, and they have these tables which they update from time to time on how much, per square centimeters you're allowed to bring, spores of something if you go and land in XY area someplace. And NASA and everybody else follow those suggestions, which are very strong suggestions, and it's a very interesting field. So the integrity of the data is important. When you do forward contamination, you want to know what you find, that it's really there and you haven't brought it with you. Backwards, and the same goes with backward contamination. If you bring something back, you really want to know again that it has been Martian, and it's not something that has evolved with you while you were doing a space mission and you got like this, terawatts of radiations or whatnot, or terasievets. And the other issue that people really understand really well is about health issues. Some bacteria have been shown, like certain types of E. coli, I believe, have been shown that in the International Space Station, when they're being exposed to the conditions there, some of their genes become more virulent, they become more pathogenic, they can be more harmful to the human immune system and physiology and health. So one of the issues with backward contamination is that you really don't want to pick anything up that might, make you ill or change your DNA or do something exotic or completely annihilate you. Now, the issue with that is that I think, as a scientist, I think the chances for that are very, 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 very small. And however, the audience should know that we have developed excellent methodology on how to avoid some of these things. And we now have like different levels, for instance, of lab safety, from biosafety 1 to biosafety 4. In biosafety 4, you can actually handle Ebola, for instance. You can handle cholera. You can handle really, really, really nasty stuff that we know are nasty here on planet Earth. And there are definitely protocols and risk managements and risk analysis and many, many ways in which, if there's going to be a human exploration mission, that's going to definitely go in there in order to understand what's happening from the microorganism point of view for ourselves, for our own health, but also for the science and the integrity of the data.
First of all, I really love the cool way you said annihilation. Like, yeah, it could happen. And secondly, I wanted to dive a little bit in this subject regarding the microbiome. So stuff that is inside my body. So how can you really control forward and backward contamination when it is inside my body? It's not external and that you can test or check.
So yeah, we do test feces. A lot of the microbiome that we know about is about testing feces, sterilizing it, changing it, doing a lot of manipulations on the samples. We have followed it that's how we know, for instance, how the gut microbiota of a baby changes, because there has been studies that says that looked at, whatever baby pushes out, and from breastfeeding and then introducing, just a few items and then going into full mode of eating different stuff. And you can see how the gut microbiota changes and adapts and helps with all the different things so the baby grows well. And then you can see what happens when you give antibiotics, for instance, and how that some of that population is completely wiped out. And then how do you introduce it again? Or do you introduce a completely different population? And how does it affect other things? So microbiota is one of the most interesting study areas, because we're now realizing that some research has come out to suggest that the microbiota in our guts actually controls our behavior. It has effects on our brain. It has effects on our mood swings. It affects our wants and wants. And so it's very interesting to understand how important is the microbiota in the gut. And you can monitor the situation there very, very nicely today with like classic microbiology, but also mainly with molecular issues. And today, of course, we also sometimes look for different markers using blood samples and so on and so forth, depending how good in your genetic sequencer is, basically. Yeah. So it's very interesting with the microbiota, and you can monitor the situation. You can get a lot of, even if you don't go for the microorganisms, even if you just go, for instance, for the protein compositions or the biomolecule compositions, you can learn a lot about the immune system, about everything else that's happening in your body and how it copes with the current situation. So it's a cool study, and you can do it.
Definitely.
There's no
Definitely.
problem. No problem.
So, yeah. Reut, between your educational activities, DMARS analog astronaut missions, and lately Midburn 2022 Camp Martian Leader, which is the Israeli version of Burning Man.
Yeah.
What do you value most? What gets your juices flowing?
I really like to see people happy and engaged, really engaged in space-related topics. But for me, everything is connected to space. So as long as people are happy and engaged, I'm very, very happy. When we are able, when as a species, we are able to make a positive impact on our knowledge base or on this planet, then I'm super happy and I'm moved. So, for instance, a recent huge advancement to our knowledge base is everything that's happening with James Webb, which is going to be a huge thing during now and for the next decade or so. We're going to know stuff that we've never done before, and it's absolutely unbelievable. And I'm also very looking forward to people coming together and helping the planet that we live in, whether it's because I'm a scientist, for me, it's easier to understand it via scientific projects, for instance, and research things. So, for instance, when you have new type of satellites that are able to combine unbelievable data in higher resolution, and all of a sudden you understand what's happening with the oceans better, and you're understanding, what's going with rivulets and rivers and where people are going to get their fresh water and where not. That really, really moves me. And I'm very happy to work with passionate individuals, and space ecosystem is all about passion, I have to say.
Yes, that's absolutely right. That's absolutely right. And I totally agree. So now it is our shout out time. Can you name an Israeli new space company that you think will have an impact in the future?
My favorite at the moment, and it changes, people don't get excited, don't get on me, but my favorite space startup Israeli is Helios. I really like their advancement with using minerals from the moon to get oxygen. I think their system works. I think they're going to have a preliminary POC on the moon soon with iSpace. They have a launch coming up, if I'm not mistaken. I've been watching them for several years, and I'm very happy with the direction they're going. And I have to say that they are part of a very fierce global ecosystem to get mining going on. So it's actually super important that we have a legged hand in it. So I'm very happy for them. Looking forward. Yeah.
Great shout out. And by the way, once we'll upload our talk, make sure that to press the links, because I always make sure that every introduction we do and shout out will lead to a specific link.
Sure.
last question from my side, and then we'll open it for the audience. What do you think the Israeli space industry will look like in 2050? So 30 years from now.
ביום שחרב בית המקדש ניתנה נבואה לשוטים. That's what I have to say.
And for those of you that don't speak Hebrew, what Reut said is nobody knows, and anyone that claims otherwise should be checked.
So there's an optimal, and I can say an optimal vision, and there's, just the daily, day-to-day life kind of vision. But
let's be optimistic, Reut. Let's be optimistic.
Let's be optimistic. So the optimistic version, Israel is innovated not only in satellites, but also innovated in the astronautics department. We are able to train and supply astronauts to the industry, which are capable to handle a lot of different situations and also are very highly professional, whether it's for science, whether it's for communication, IT, whatnot. And other things as well. We have a presence on the moon as well, and we are able.
What about Mars? With all the Mars knowledge that we accumulate so far.
So 30 years is enough to assess whether we need a Martian conglomerate and association or not, and whether we should make the goal over there. I think Mars is a big stretch. I think the Americans are definitely going to get there before everybody else. And I just hope that in the next 30 years, we actually get to the moon as a country and as a business partner, and also as a diplomatic partner to some perhaps countries in the region. I would like to see, of course, more women in the space ecosystem here in Israel. So in 2030, 50% of the workforce in the space ecosystem in Israel. 50. At least 50 will be women, and of course that will be reflected also in the managerial levels. And yeah, that's very optimistic, I think.
Great. So Elana, would you be so kind and let Reut know
questions?
What people are asking?
Of course. So the first question asks, does astrobiology include research into taking Earth-based organisms into off-planet environments?
So the answer is yes. So far, we have taken various microorganisms and organisms to the International Space Station, which is off-planet area. So we've taken bees, we've taken mice, we've taken different microorganisms, and we learned a lot from it. And I do believe there is a mission coming up to bring something to the moon as well. I know China with Chang'e 4 actually sent a small plant to check how it works and what's happening, and whether it's able to start its life in, of course, sealed inside the spaceship, but still it worked very well. So astrobiology does include that as well. Thank you.
Thank you. And the second question is, how about rats and their resistance?
What about rats and their resistance? Oh my God, is this someone like from New York or something? I don't know. I know that you have a rats issue. There are no rats. I think they did take actually a couple of rats to the International Space Station. Again, the same thing as mice. I'm not 100% sure about it. We have not taken rats outside. Rats are unable to withstand any of the conditions of space, so no worries about that. Rats are not resistant.
Okay. A question coming from LinkedIn. Dear Reut, will you attend the Ilan Ramot
yes.
20? Okay.
Yes, yeah. I will.
Yes. Okay.
Who is that? I need to see. So many people to see.
Oh, yes, of course.
Okay. Sure.
Jersey, I hope I pronounced correctly. Jersey ZYW asks the question. Okay. So he's going to look for you. Next question goes, what is your view on the risk of microbial diffusion among human settlements on or near the moon? Any risks linked to mutation? Are current measures on planetary protection sufficient to avoid contamination in space and back on Earth?
Wow, that's such a beautiful, big question. Are the measures sufficient? Are we going to know what's the issues with mutations?
It
So
sounds like a beginning of a horror movie.
it's a big. Let's start. What was the first question out of the three?
The first question is
it
microorganisms, microbial diffusion among human settlements on or near the moon. The risks linked to that.
So we talked about it a little in our conversation now, me and Meidad, there are risks involved. The risks are a combination of two factors. One is that if you are working in a stressful environment, your immune system is going down. If you are exposed again and again to things which are a hassle to you and perhaps also present like a physical danger, if you go outside on EVA and you're exposed to radiation, for instance, that also affect how your body works. So on one hand, you have this issue with your own immune system. And on the other hand, you have the issue of what happened to bacteria that is exposed to these conditions. And I don't think we have enough data on that. I do think that some bacteria will go into like hibernation and sort of just fall down, but some of them might accelerate. And one of the things that we have to figure out is whether from those bacteria that accelerate their evolution and gain more mutation, whether they are becoming deadly or not. Because some bacteria would go through, I don't know, 10,000 mutations in like one day, and it looks like really, really scary, but at the end of time, it's just a harmless environmental bacteria. And most of the bacteria on planet Earth are completely harmless. So we really need to gain more information about that one. But that's a great question. What was the other question?
Risks linked to mutations.
Yeah, so depends whether the bacteria or virus are pathological, but the risk are first, the rate of infection could go up. Second, the resistance to antibiotics can go down, and then you're in a real trouble because antibiotics are usually frontline against bacteria. Not a lot of antiviral medicines out there here on planet Earth. So if you're meeting with a deadly virus up there on the moon or elsewhere, good luck with that. And yeah, there are many things connected with mutation. So the question is whether it's deadly bacteria that goes through mutation or just a harmless one. Thank you.
I would like to add regarding this point, I think the question also relates to the fact that the extreme radiation levels around the moon and outside the protective magnetic field of Earth.
Yeah.
Are we aware of any impact regarding the amount of mutations and how fast they happen when exposed to extreme radiation?
Yes. So there have been many studies, and you will be happy to know that most of bacteria dies when it is exposed to that amount of radiation. They don't survive it, most of them. There are very few extremophiles on planet Earth that are able to survive it. One of them is Deinococcus radiodurans, which is very happy also to be at nuclear reactors and get some gamma radiation. And what we find is that there's a really tiny sector in the microorganism world that is able to repair its DNA very quickly. And then it repairs sometimes with high fidelity. And so the original instructions are retained in the DNA code and there are no mutations, but sometimes there are a bit of flip and flap there. And some mutations enter the genetic code when you do the repairing, the DNA repairing. So there's a tiny sector that we know of today on microorganisms on planet Earth that can handle that type of radiation and survive and go through mutation. But most of the bacteria that we know completely dead after 1 hour or so with that type of radiation with no protection whatsoever. The interesting thing is that the regolith, whether it's on Mars or on Moon, it's enough to have perhaps 5 centimeters, 10 centimeters, even that, and that protects the bacteria already. So that's another question.
What about the bacteria and viruses inside our body or in the habitats? They do
Yeah. Yeah.
They have some kind of interaction with the radiation, maybe not as extreme as the outside environment, but still it's higher than on Earth.
So I'm not aware of a human subject that was exposed to high radiation and then his or her gut microbiota was checked. That should be done on animals first, I would suggest. I think it's a great research topic. You should write a grant, and we can check that out. Basically, we know today that so your body and mammals, for instance, we have water. We have quite a lot of water inside our bodies, and water are actually a really good barrier for radiation. So I would think that things that are inside our bodies and inside animals are actually fairly well protected from a lot of, I mean, they do get the radiation, just like that's why you need, for instance, vest and why you need all the things, but it really depends on the scenario you're talking about. I think they're more protected than everything outside.
Okay, should we go on? There was a final part of that question that asked about the current measures on planetary protection, whether they're sufficient to avoid contamination in space and back to Earth.
I would go with no, they're not sufficient. But, I think it's like a 150-page document. You're most welcome to Google COSPAR and planetary protection and just go through the things. The reason I don't think there's anything which is bulletproof for biological contamination from my experience as a biologist, right? So this is the way I see it. It's very hard to completely to eliminate it. That's why they stopped, by the way, in the 1990s to sterilize rovers and spaceship that were sent to Mars. They don't know, no longer do they go through this immense sterilization process, UV and vacuum and atmospheric pressure and all that stuff. As far as I'm aware, they stopped doing that because the National Academy of Science in the United States looked at the data, did the analysis and said, okay, we're not eliminating 100% of what can we send. So what we're going to do is we're going to send it to a distant place on planet Mars, and we're going to make sure that it has a very, 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 very low concentration of spores per square meters and so on and so forth. But it's not 100%. And in fact, there's one method that is known to disintegrate everything, but we cannot use it on spaceships anyhow, so it's not relevant. But there's no way to completely eliminate, so you constantly basically have to do risk management, risk analysis, and monitor the situation all the time.
Thank you. Okay.
Thank you.
And then Martina asked, wait, first, this was more related to the topic. I'm doing a CubeSat project, is Amit asking, to study effects of microgravity on rotifiers and tardigrades. We have also considered rat sperm as specimen. Any suggestions for any other microorganisms?
With a CubeSat, depends what your analytical equipment that you have on your CubeSat. Some things you can check that are related to photosynthesis. I don't know if you're going to expose these things to complete space or they're in an enclosed position. There's some very interesting things that you can do with human tissues, for instance, and check how, for instance, how some medicine can disintegrate or not disintegrate or go into the different type of tissues and vascular, perhaps, things. There are many, many things that you can try. It really depends on your setup and how much gram your payload is.
Okay, and then back to Martina, who asks, who do you think will get humans first on the moon? Which country, agency, and company? And then she asks, what was the name of the Israeli organization? But I'm not sure which was the organization at this point.
Okay. So this is like, I feel like in the Mondial again. Who's going to be the winning team to get people on the moon?
Not Argentina.
Not Argentina, not Brazil. It's a very tough question. I really want the Americans to be there first, and they have the knowledge still to do that. But China is very serious about building stuff and making a base on the moon, and they might get there a step earlier. Might.
Okay. What are your thoughts? Is it too early to think about space economy business models?
Of course, there's so much business to be done. It depends what your model is, that's all. There's a lot of money to be done in space, but you do have to tread carefully. So at the moment, the most common knowledge is that if you do something with satellites, you will be able to make money out of it. Earth observations are a big thing. The download, stream, analyze the data, look at the images provided for intelligence, provided for the UN, provided for city, provided for people, provided for you have a market for that. So if you do something with satellite and that's a space economy, then you're gold basically. I have to say that what's happening in the US is pretty amazing. So in the US, because they have federal funding, and NASA is now, for the last 10 years, is funneling that funding into the private American market, you're actually seeing model business that are there because it's a big market and because they're funded by the government, and it's gonna happen. So that's commercial space station. Those are launches. Also, I think a bit of what I was talking about before about astronaut training is happening quite a lot now, also for different sectors of the public. I know, for instance, Blue Origin are taking care of their crew support because they have so many tourists coming up, and someone needs to take care of the family members that are staying on planet Earth, and because they're working on orbital reef and so on and so forth. So yeah, they're doing or Blue Origin are doing quite a lot of interesting things as well as SpaceX and a lot of nanoracks and other people. So I think the United States is basically exploding at the moment with business opportunities, but it's a hard market to enter as far as I'm aware. So there's a lot of different business models. You just have to look for the right one for your use case. That's how I see it.
Start thinking about health insurance for space tourists and Medicare for
and
future.
Please, no cryptocurrencies. Okay. Let's put that at the side for a moment. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, we have a question in the chat asked on behalf of a 5.5-year-old. She's really interested in space. She doesn't want to become an astronaut though, because the rockets shout out too much fire. And she's also interested in art. What kind of opportunities exist now or in the future for space-oriented artists?
Actually, quite a lot. So people who are working now, like Axiom 1 and Blue Origin, who are working on commercial space station, are really looking for artists to make the difference for their customers' experience. Okay, nobody is trying to copy paste the International Space Station. Everybody wants something unique. And also I can tell you that from my side as a scientist, I absolutely love working with artists. So I'll give you an example for an excellent collaboration that I've learned via the mission that Eitan Stiva was on, and he took several art projects. But the best one was by this artist called Liat Segal, and she did something which can only exist in space. Basically, she worked with her friend who was a physicist in one of the universities in Israel, and then designed this beautiful small statue, which was made out of these aluminum tubes, if I'm not mistaken, golden ones as well, beautifully. And what they did is that they had this tiny dots inside where water could come out. And the idea was, because of microgravity and the way water reacts on the International Space Station, as we know, they sort of like float around and they try to go to this symmetrical, perfect shape. That statue came alive only once and only on the International Space Station. It could not happen here on planet Earth. That's brilliant. And it's using that's brilliant. And that's using physical, scientific, really good, proper basic assumptions and rigorous physical data. But then the artist just came and did something completely different around it. So artists are very important for understanding the human condition in space, and also for providing us completely new ways of exploring it. And I really hope that we will see more and more artists, because that's the part where we make the difference. We got so much used to scientists and engineering to do things in a very certain way that we sort of lost the touch on what the beautiful place is space. And it's going to be amazing. So please do continue your art and your interest in space, and let's meet.
And I think this is a great opportunity to also be reminded of Nicole Stott, an astronaut who is a painter, and she made some beautiful paintings from outer space, and even made jewelry out of these paintings. And I completely agree, Reut. What is humanity without art?
Yes, and Dr. Sayan Proctor, and we're seeing a lot of more artists coming in, and it's actually sometimes hard, for instance, to paint in space. It's really not that easy for the color to come out and to spread on the to spread on the paper in the same way you're used to when you're doing it on the table on planet Earth. So it's an interesting environment to go and do art projects.
So the bottom line is, yes, there's a lot of stuff that you can do as an artist in space, and just do it. You can do it.
Thank you. I'm sure she feels empowered by this. Going to the last questions. Do you think we can learn how to repair human DNA from extremophiles that are able to do that?
I'm not familiar with extremophiles who deal with human DNA at the moment. Let me think about it. Nope.
The question is, can we learn from extremophiles
how we already know
repair our own DNA?
So basically, we have learned from viruses on a system to mix and match and cut our DNA. This system is called CRISPR. It's a very interesting. It's a very interesting system, and whoever discovered also got a Nobel Prize a few years ago. So look up CRISPR and you will find the answer to all your solutions. We do not know yet how to heal through genetic modification. We have been studying it for at least 20 years. So we're getting close to the point where we will understand. But at the moment, we don't have an answer for that. But we're getting there, very close.
But we do have some very good leads using vector viruses. So injecting DNA sequences into viruses and then allowing them to heal us.
Yes. So usually what happens, not usually, but some of those, first of all, it's for very, very specific conditions, right? Very specific heritage genetic diseases that we know exactly the mechanism. And it took like 40 years to understand the mechanism behind a genetic deficiency. And the second thing, I do believe that they work through giving the body an opportunity to produce, for instance, more enzyme and more proteins in order to remove the effect of the deficiency and things like that. I'm not completely sure that the virus actually insert that DNA into the human DNA, but that could work. So we know perhaps a few genetic diseases in which we can do some genetic modification, but most of the time we're still working that out. We're not certain.
All right, last question. There doesn't seem to be a higher radiation-related illness, such as cancer or mortality, among astronauts, despite being exposed to higher radiation. I don't have the papers at my fingertips, she says. Martina says, do you have an explanation for that?
Yes, most astronauts are not exposed to lethal doses of radiation anymore. The reason for that is first that they're in low Earth orbit, and that you have the Van Halen belts, and they help, and you still are around the magnetic field of the planet Earth. And so you can some of the most harmful radiation is basically being plucked away and does not reach them. And then the rest of the radiation, so for instance, if there is like an emergency, like a solar flare, they do need to go into like a certain compound and like to the inner side of the space station to make sure that they are protected. And then they wear their suits. They have, I think they have like perhaps water cans. I don't know. The whole thing is like an escape pod that they need to sit inside. And so to minimize the amount of when they get like an extreme event of radiation. Also, for instance, female astronauts have no problem, no issues with giving birth. So the only issues that they have is that it's the same issues that if you're a female on Earth and you decided to give birth late in your career, then they deal with the same issues as you deal here with on planet Earth. There are no issues with birth defects or problems with pregnancy or anything like that. That means that the current system in the International Space Station is okay, and it keeps astronauts healthy for a long time. So that's a really good sign.
Thank you. I think the question side is over, and we can proceed to do the closing. Any more remarks, Meidad?
First of all, Reut, thank you so very much. It was super interesting. And the fact that we went way above the hour, just say how much we enjoyed your remarks, notes, and knowledge sharing.
Anytime. I told you, it's the space community. I'm happy to talk anytime.
And I'm just reminding all of the viewers and the audience that we'll be back next month with the first episode of 2023. And my guest will be Mr. Ram Levy. And we'll talk about cybersecurity for space missions, a trend or a necessity. He
was also at Midburn with me. So why don't you start with that and see how you go.
Okay, inside information. I always appreciate inside information. Stay tuned. Again, Reut, thank you so very much for being my guest. I enjoyed it tremendously. And back to you, Elena.
Thank you both. And before we say goodbye, let's announce the first event of next year. Be aware that there will be other Space Cafe before, but this is the one that we have set already. So on the 26th of January at 7 a.m. Central European Time and 5 p.m. Australian Eastern Australian summertime, and many other time zones, because we are reaching out to India and also Colorado in the US. We will have our Space Cafe Law Breakfast with Stephen Freeland, and he will be with Deepika Jaya Cody and Skip Smith. All events, as always, are going to be online on Eventbrite, and we would really love to hear your feedback. So please check in with us on Twitter, Facebook, and LinkedIn. And don't forget to sign up for our daily and our bi-weekly newsletters. And if you'd like to treat yourselves with something special, become a Space Watcher today or help us in the supporter program. Thank you all very much for your interest today, all your questions. It was a very engaging conversation. Toda Rava, thank you, Meidad, for hosting that inspiring talk. And thanks again to the entire team behind the scenes for doing that great job. Week by week again, thank you, Reut, for your presence and your energy. I hope you will all stay safe and healthy. Thank you for joining us. To our audience, I hope to see you in upcoming events. In the meantime, visit our website, follow us on social media. Happy holidays, Happy New Year. Take care, and don't forget, become a Space Watcher. Bye.